The Thanksgiving table was set with Mom's best china. The Wedgwood that only came out for holidays and funerals. 22 people crammed into my parents' formal dining room. A sea of extended family members who'd driven from 3 different states to celebrate together. The turkey was golden, the sides were plentiful, and my sister Vivian was holding court like she was arguing before the Supreme Court. "I have an announcement," she declared, standing at her place near the head of the table. She was wearing a silk blouse that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. At least more than my family thought my monthly grocery budget was. "As of Monday, I will officially be a partner at Harrison & Cole." The table erupted in applause. Aunt Margaret actually wiped away tears. Uncle Robert raised his wine glass. My parents beamed with the incandescent pride they reserved exclusively for Vivian's achievements. "Partner at 34, Dad said, shaking his head in wonder. "At one of the most prestigious law firms in the city. That's my girl." Vivian's eyes found mine across the table. She smiled. That particular smile she'd perfected over 32 years of sibling rivalry. The one that looked warm to everyone else, but was designed specifically to cut. "Of course, not everyone can be successful." She gestured in my direction with her wine glass. "Jamie here is still finding herself. 32 years old, no real career, contributing nothing while I make partner. You're a waste of space, honestly. But I guess every family needs one." The laughter was uncomfortable, but present. Some relatives shifted in their seats. Others nodded along. They'd heard the narrative so many times they'd stopped questioning it. Dad nodded proudly at Vivian as if publicly humiliating me was just another accomplishment to celebrate. Mom patted me hand from across the table. "Don't worry, sweetie. Maybe next year you'll figure things out." I smiled. Just smiled. Then I opened my phone under the table and sent an email to Patricia Weston, my attorney. "Dissolve silent partnership in Harrison & Cole. Liquidate immediately. Full withdrawal off capital investment per Section 7.3 of the partnership agreement." Her reply came in under 2 minutes. "Confirmed, initiating withdrawal of $3.10 million capital contribution. Harrison & Cole will receive formal notice within the hour." "Are you certain?" I typed back. Never been more certain. Mom was bringing out the pumpkin pie when Vivian's phone started buzzing. She ignored it at first. She was still accepting congratulations from distant cousins, but it kept going. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Then it started ringing with an actual call. She glanced at the screen and frowned. "It's Richard Harrison, the senior partner." She stood already moving toward the hallway. "I need to take this. Probably just congratulating me on the partnership." Through the doorway, I watched her answer with a confident smile. I watched that smile freeze. I watched the color drain from her face as Richard Harrison delivered news that would reshape everything she thought she knew about her precious law firm. I helped myself to a slice of pumpkin pie. That it was delicious. In our family, there was only one acceptable definition of success: professional prestige. Dad was a cardiologist with a reputation that preceded him everywhere. Mom was a retired federal judge whose opinions were still cited in law school classrooms. Vivian had been groomed for law school since she could pronounce a jurisprudence. They'd literally given her a toy gavel for her FTH birthday. The Whitmore family didn't just have expectations. We had a dynasty to maintain, a reputation to uphold, a legacy of professional excellence that stretched back 3 generations and showed no signs of slowing. And then there was me. I was never interested in medicine or law. While Vivian was mock-trying cases in her bedroom and Dad was teaching her how to diagnose from symptoms, I was in the garage taking apart old computers. While she was interning at law firms every summer, I was teaching myself to code, to build, to create things from nothing. Jamie's going through a phase. Mom would tell relatives at every holiday gathering, "She'll come around. She just needs to find her path." I never came around. Instead, I dropped out of pre-med after 1 semester to my parents' horror and switched to computer science. The day I told them, Dad literally left the dinner table without a word. Mom cried. Vivian sent me a text that said only, "Congratulations on throwing away your future." Then I dropped out of that too because I was already making more money from my side projects than my professors were making in salary. That news went over even worse. Dad didn't speak to me for 3 months. She's throwing away her future. I overheard Dad tell Mom when he was 20. No degree, no profession, just playing with computers like she's still 12. What he didn't know, what I never told him, was that my playing with computers had already made me $500,000. A security vulnerability I discovered and reported had earned me a bug bounty that would have taken him months to earn in surgery. An app I'd built as a joke had been acquired by a tech company for 6 figures before I turned 21. I told Noon. Why would I? Every time I tried to share an accomplishment, Vivian found a way to minimize it or redirect the conversation to her own achievements. Every family dinner became a competition I'd never asked to enter. And in Miprint's eyes, a competition I always lost. So I stopped competing. I let them believe I was the failure, the dropout, the waste of space who couldn't get her life together. It was easier than fighting for recognition from people who had already decided who I was. Meanwhile, in the background, I was quietly building an empire. By 25, my net worth had crossed $10 million. A cybersecurity startup I'd co-founded was acquired by a major tech company in a deal that valued my shares at $8.2 million. I used that money to start Thornwood Capital, a private investment firm that focused on professional services companies, law firms, accounting practices, medical groups, the kinds of businesses my family worshipped but didn't understand from the capital side. I understood them intimately. I'd grown up watching how these businesses worked, listening to Miprints discuss the politics and economics of their professions. I knew that even the most prestigious law firms were often one bad year away from crisis. That their balance sheets were fragile, their cash flow dependent on a handful of major clients, their partnership structures designed to extract maximum profit while leaving minimal cushion for emergencies. Thornwood Capital specialized in providing silent capital partnerships to these firms. We'd invest significant sums, typically $2 million to $5 million, in exchange for fixed returns and profit participation. No management involvement, no name on the door, just quiet money that let prestigious firms expand, hire talent, and weather difficult periods. When Harrison and Cole approached us 4 years ago, I almost laughed. The firm was in trouble. They'd lost 3 major clients in a corporate espionage scandal that wasn't their fault, but had tainted them by association. Their senior partners were threatening to leave for competitors. They needed capital desperately, $3 million minimum, and the banks were nervous about lending to law firms in the current climate. My team brought meth deal without knowing my connection. Strong underlying practice, the analyst said, just needs stabilization capital. The upside potential is significant if they can weather this storm. I looked at the partner roster and saw a familiar name. Vivian Whitmore, Senior Association Track, for partnership. My sister's firm, desperate for money, coming to me. The irony was so thick I could taste it. I invested $3.1 million through Thornwood Capital, structured as asset partnership with profit participation. The deal was handled by attorneys with no mention of my name anywhere in the documentation. To Harrison and Cole, we were simply an investment fund, making a strategic bet in their recovery. And recover they did. With our capital infusion, they stabilized operations, retained their key partners, and began rebuilding their client base. Within 2 years, they were profitable again. Within 3, they were thriving, expanding into new practice areas, hiring aggressively, climbing the rankings of top regional firms. The trade publications ran features about their remarkable turnaround, crediting the partners' strategic vision and unwavering commitment to excellence. No one mentioned the anonymous $3.10 million that had made the turnaround possible, and no one knew to mention it. My investment had doubled in value. The $3.10 million was now worth over $6 million on paper, generating annual returns of nearly $400,000. Every quarter, I received detailed reports about the firm's performance, about cases one clients acquired, associates promoted, about Vivian's trajectory toward partnership, and through it all, Vivian had no idea. She didn't know that her waste of space sister owned a significant stake in the firm she was so proud to join. She didn't know that her partnership, the crowning achievement she just announced at Thanksgiving, was only possible because I had quietly saved the firm from collapse. Every holiday, she mocked me. Every family gathering, she reminded everyone of my failures. Every phone call with Mom somehow circled back to how successful Vivian was and how concerning my life choices were. I absorbed it all, smiled through it, went home to my penthouse apartment in my investment portfolio, and reminded myself that revenge was a dish best served at Thanksgiving, right between the turkey and the pie, that someday the truth would come out, that patience was its own form of power. I just didn't know that someday would be this particular Thanksgiving when my sister finally pushed too far. Vivian was in the hallway for 15 minutes. We could all hear fragments of the conversation through the wall. What do you mean withdrawing? And that's impossible. But the partnership vote was Monday. Her voice kept rising, cracking in ways it never heard from my always composed sister. The rest of the family tried to continue the meal, but the energy had shifted. Forks moved food around plates. Conversations started and stopped. Everyone kept glancing toward the hallway where Vivian was now pacing, one hand pressed against her forehead. What's going on? Mom whispered to me, Asif, I might know. I shrugged. Work stuff probably. You know how demanding law firms are. When Vivian finally returned to the table, she looked like she'd aged 5 years. Her perfect makeup was smudged. Her hands were trembling. She sat down heavily, staring at her untouched pie like it might contain answers. Honey, Dad reached for her arm. What's wrong? Our silent investor, she said, her voice hollow. The capital partner that saved the firm 4 years ago. They're withdrawing all of it. $3.1 million in capital plus their profit participation. They want it liquidated immediately. Can they do that? Uncle Robert asked. Apparently, the partnership agreement has a withdrawal clause 90-day notice and they've given it. Vivian's voice cracked. Richard said, we'll have to postpone all new partnerships until the capital situation is resolved. That includes mine. The table went silent. The partnership that had been celebrated 10 minutes ago was suddenly in jeopardy. But surely you can find other investors, Mom said, ever the problem solver in 90 days with the holiday season starting. Vivian laughed bitterly. Law firm investments are specialized. The investors who do this don't just appear overnight. Richard said, we might have veto. She stopped composing herself. We might have to let some associates go toke over the capital shortfall. I took another bite of pie and said nothing. The weeks after Thanksgiving were chaos for Harrison and Cole. Without the $3.1 million in capital from Thornwood, the firm's balance sheet looked suddenly precarious. The banks that had been happy to extend credit lines started asking uncomfortable questions. The expansion plans that had been approved were put on hold. The partnership track that Vivian had worked toward for 8 years was frozen indefinitely. She called me 3 days after Thanksgiving. The first time she'd initiated a call to me in over a year. Jamie, I need your help. Her voice was strained, missing its usual condescension. You work with computers, right? Maybe you know someone who knows someone in finance. The firm is trying to find replacement investors, and we're running out of options. I was a waste of space, I said mildly. Why would I have useful connections? This isn't the time for. She stopped, took a breath. I'm sorry I said that. It was harsh, but this is serious. My career is on the line. Please, I'll think about it, I said, and hung up. Mom called next. Then Dad, both with the same message. Help your sister put aside whatever petty resentments you have. Beta bigger person. We know you two have your differences, Mom said. But Familia's family. Vivian has worked so hard for this partnership. Can't you just try to help? I've been helping, I said quietly, more than you know. What does that mean? Nothing. Never mind. I'll see what I can do. I let 2 more weeks pass. Vivian left increasingly desperate voicemails. The firm hired a financial advisor to find replacement investors. Richard Harrison made calls to every investment fund in his network. None of them would commit. Law firm investments were risky, specialized, and most funds that did this kind of deal had already made their allocations for the year. Harrison and Cole was running out of time and options. Vivian's partnership, the thing she'd worked toward for 8 years, the achievement she'd announced so triumphantly at Thanksgiving, was slipping away. I could have let her suffer longer.
Part of me wanted to.
The part that remembered every cruel comment, every dismissive laugh, Every time she called me a waste of space in front of people who should have defended me. But I'm not cruel. I never was. That was always the difference between us. On December 20th, I texted Vivian, "Come to me apartment tomorrow at 2 p.m. I think I can help, but we need to talk in person." Her response was immediate. "Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'll be there." Vivian arrived at my building at exactly 2 p.m. She'd clearly agonized over what to wear, professional enough to show respect, casual enough to suggest this was a sisterly visit rather than a desperate plea. She'd landed on a cashmere sweater and designer jeans, the uniform of wealthy women trying to appear relatable. She froze in the lobby when the doorman greeted me by name. "Good afternoon, Miss Whitmore," he said. "Your guest, my sister." She's expected. Vivian said nothing as we rode the elevator to the penthouse level, said nothing as I unlocked the door to my apartment, 2,400 square feet overlooking the river with floor-to-ceiling windows and art on the walls that would have made her jaw drop if she knew what it was worth. This as she looked around, unable to complete the sentence. "You live here for 3 years now. But how? You don't have a job. You didn't." She stopped recalibrating. "Emian, I didn't know you were doing this well." "No," I agreed. "You didn't know. You never asked." I gestured toward the living room.
Sit down, Vivian.
"We have a lot to discuss." She sat on my leather sofa, looking as uncomfortable as I'd ever seen her. The confident lawyer who commanded courtrooms was gone. In her place was a woman whose world was crumbling and who had come to her waste-off space sister for help. I sat across from her and placed a folder on the coffee table between us. "Do you know who Thornwood Capital is?" I asked. "That's the investor who's withdrawing," she said. "Richard's been trying to reach someone there for weeks, but they only communicate through attorneys." "Open the folder."
She did.
Inside the operating agreement for Thornwood Capital showing as founder and managing partner. Bank statements documenting the $3.10 million investment in Harrison and Cole. 4 years of profit distributions flowing from her law firm to my accounts. The partnership agreement that Richard Harrison himself had signed, never knowing that the silent investor saving his firm was his newest partner's little sister. Vivian's face went white, then red, then a shade of gray I'd never seen before. This as she looked up at me, then back at the documents. "You're Thornwood Capital. I'm the majority owner and founder." "Yes, but that means," her voice caught. "4 years ago when the firm was in crisis, when we almost went under. That was me. I invested $3.1 million to save Harrison and Cole from collapse. To save your career, Vivian, before you even knew it needed saving." I kept my voice calm, controlled, the same way I'd learned to manage my emotions at family dinners for years. "Your partnership track, your trajectory, your entire future at that firm. It exists because you're waste off space." Sister wrote a check when no one else would. He was crying now. Silent tears rolling down her face, smearing the makeup she'd so carefully applied. The composed lawyer, who never showed emotion in court, was falling apart on my leather sofa. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. "All these years, all the things I said, and you never." Would a they've made a difference? I leaned forward. "Would you have treated me differently if you'd known? Or would you have found some way to minimize it, to take credit, to make it about you? Would you have said, 'Well, Jamie's little investment helped, but really it was our hard work that saved the firm'?" She didn't answer. We both knew what the answer was. "I spent my entire life being compared to you. I continue being told I was the failure, the disappointment, the waste of space who couldn't get her life together. And the whole time I was building something that dwarfs your law firm salary." Thornwood Capital manages over $40 million in investments across 6 law firms and 3 accounting practices. My personal net worth is just under $18 million, that I've built a company that employs 11 people and generates returns that most hedge funds would envy. I let those numbers hang in the air, let her do the math, compare her partner track salary to my portfolio, measure her success against mine using the only metric our family had ever cared about. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the river below. "But you never asked. You never wondered. You were so busy being the successful one that you never noticed I was building something real, You just needed me to be a failure so I could feel like a success. What do I have to do? Vivian asked, her voice broken. To save the firm, to fix this. Please, Jamie, tell me what you want. It turned from the window. I'm going to give you a choice, Vivian. 2 options. Anything. Option 1. I complete the withdrawal. Harrison and Cole Scramblesto find replacement capital. Maybe they succeed, maybe they don't. Your partnership gets delayed by a year, maybe 2, maybe forever. You deal with the consequences of a firm in crisis. She closed her eyes. And option 2. I reinstate the investment with modifications, a renegotiated partnership agreement that gives Thornwood a larger profit participation, a formal acknowledgement of my role as capital partner no longer silent, and I paused, making sure she was listening, at the firm's holiday party next week, where they were planning to announce your partnership. You introduced me to Richard Harrison as your sister, as the founder of Thornwood Capital, as the person who saved his firm. You want me to publicly acknowledge that your waste of space sister has been bankrolling your career for 4 years. Yes, that's exactly what I want. I sat back down across from her. I'm not asking you to humiliate yourself, Vivian. I'm asking you to tell the truth. There's a difference. And honestly, the truth is far more interesting than the fiction we've both been living. She was quiet for a long moment. I could see her wrestling with it. Her pride, her image, the narrative she'd constructed about who was successful and who was not. The story she told herself for 30 years about being the accomplished sister, while he was the failure. There's one more thing, I said. No more waste of space comments, and oh more comparisons at family dinners, and oh more treating me like an embarrassment you have to explain to relatives. From now on, you treat me as an equal, because that's what I am, that's what I've always been. You were just too blind to see it. She looked at me for a long time. Really looked, maybe for the first time in years. Seeing not the failure sister she'd constructed in her mind, but the person who was actually sitting across from her. I've been horrible to you, she said quietly. I don't know how to fix that. You can start by accepting option 2. The rest will take time. She nodded slowly. Option 2, I accept. The holiday party was exactly as awkward as I'd anticipated and exactly as satisfying. Vivian introduced me to Richard Harrison with visible discomfort, but genuine words. Richard, I'd like you to meet Ms. Sister Jamie Whitmore. She's the founder and managing partner of Thornwood Capital. Richard's face went through several phases. Confusion, recognition, and then a kind of stunned respect. You're Thornwood? But we've been trying to reach you for weeks. You're Yuri Vivian's sister. The very one, I said, shaking his hand. I understand there's been some concern about our investment. I'd be happy to discuss the path forward. We spent an hour in his office that evening renegotiating terms that would keep Thornwood invested in Harrison and Cole for another 5 years. The new agreement gave me a seat on their advisory board and a significantly higher profit participation. In exchange, the firm got stability and Vivian got her partnership. She was officially made partner on January 15th. The celebration dinner. She gave a toast that made my mother cry. I want to thank my family for supporting me, she said, raising her glass. And I especially want to thank my sister, Jamie, who has supported Harrison and Cole in ways I never knew and never appreciated. I spent years calling her the family failure while she was quietly building something extraordinary. I was wrong. I was so wrong, and I'm grateful that she's generous enough to give Meth a chance to learn from that. The room applauded. My parents looked shell-shocked. Mom was actually crying, dabbing at her eyes with her napkin. Dad kept glancing between me and Vivian, like he couldn't quite reconcile the new information with his old assumptions. The successful daughter he'd celebrated was publicly thanking the failure daughter he'd dismissed. It was in its own way a beautiful kind of chaos. After the dinner, he pulled me aside, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Jamie, I owe you an apology. A real one. Not the kind I've been making for years. That didn't mean anything. I had no idea. You never said anything. And I never asked. I was so busy being proud of Vivian that I forgot to wonder about you. You never asked, I said. You were so busy being proud of Vivian that you never wondered what I was doing. Henna did slowly, accepting the truth of it. I'd like to change that if you let me. Well, see, I said. Change takes time. It's been 6 months now. Vivian and I aren't best friends. We may never be, but we're something we've never been before. Honest with each other. She calls to ask my advice on firm finances. I called to ask her opinion on legal structures for new investments. We've become improbably allies. At Easter dinner last month, Mom asked about my work for the first time in years. Actually asked, actually listened, actually seemed interested in understanding what Thornwood Capital does. I don't understand half of it, she admitted, but I can tell you love it, and I can tell you're good at it. I'm sorry, I didn't see that sooner. It wasn't enough. Not for 20+ years off being invisible, but it was a start. Thornwood Capital continues to grow. We've expanded into 3 new markets and crossed $60 million in assets under management. Last month, Forbes reached out about including me in a feature on women in private capital. I said, yes, it's time to stop being silent. The article will run next month. They want to photograph me in my penthouse with the river view behind me and my investment credentials on display. The headline they're proposing is The Quiet Force: How Jamie Whitmore Built a $60 million Empire in the Shadows. It's a little dramatic, but I like it. After 32 years of being invisible, a little drama feels earned. Because here's what I've learned. Being invisible is a form of power, but it's also a form of person. You can build empires in silence, but eventually you have to step into the light. Eventually, you have to let people see what you've created, not for their validation, but for your own. Not because you need their approval, but because hiding is its own form of shame, and you've done nothing to be ashamed of. I was the waste of space for 32 years. Now I'm the silent partner who saved my sister's firm, the founder of a $60 million investment company, and the person my family calls when they need financial advice. Some reversals are worth $3.1 million. This one was worth more. It was worth finally being seen, worth having my parents ask about my work with genuine interest instead of polite tolerance. Worth watching Vivian introduce me to her colleagues as Ms. Ister, the investor, instead of pretending I didn't exist. Worth knowing that I'd built something real, something lasting, something that had value beyond anyone else's opinion of it. I was the waste of space for 32 years. But space, it turns out, is where you build things when no one is watching. And I built an empire.